Hi, my name is CJ and this is my RC channel. So, servo. You have got to be kidding me. This thing actually comes with this piece. You've actually got to buy the servo to get part of the servo saver. That is kind of diabolical in my opinion, because it means that if you bought this a different servo than this Spectrum that they say is the one you have to have, you're not going to have this piece, which means you're going to start your kit and you're going to be like, wait a second, where's the piece for this servo saver that's missing? I don't know. I don't really like that. It's like you're being forced to do something you don't want to do. Okay, anyway, let's test the servo and make sure it's centered, as you should always do. There we go. Servo is centered. So now we can position this so that is okay. That's not quite on center, but I don't think we can get it there with that. Well, let's try. Let's pull this and see if we can go one tooth to the other direction. You may just have to adjust that in the radio with sub trim, and if we got to do that, that's fine. Okay, that's a little closer to center, so I'm going to put it on this, going in this direction. Is that fully down? Yeah, it looks like. Okay. Spring cap, and that is going to be 5169, which is an M 2.5 by 12 countersunk, which is probably this one. Okay, I am going to enlarge the hole in this washer. That needs to be able to pass through here smoothly so the spring action can function. There we go. Okay, so now this piece gets threaded on with this thin bolt here, and then this nut is gonna come down from above. It just passes through the servo here, the servo arm. Okay, wrong size. You don't have to over tighten this in particular, you just want it to be snug so this little arm can't move around, or the post can't move around on the arm. So what's going to go on here is this piece. Oops, I got it upside down. That should be at the top. Not a big deal. Okay, on this barrel you've got a flange at one end. You want the flanged end to be facing up against the servo arm and the bolt to come through there. And if you haven't already gotten the picture, this servo, this post here, is going to ride in here. Oops. Like that. And it's going to pull this back and forth. Don't over tighten that. If you over tighten it, it will make this barrel swell a little bit, and that'll keep it from dropping in smoothly. There we go. So that can move around a little bit in there. And I see, okay, now also, you see how I was trying to tighten this to the end there? If you look very closely, this rod is pressing outwards here. So it's not made to screw all the way in. I'm going to unscrew that a little bit, because that's what's keeping that piece from the little arm from going in all the way. I'm going to take that out of turn. And now this should fit in there better. Yeah, now it moves. There may be a little bit of a bulge there still. I may need to take an X-Acto and just shave a little bit of plastic there, just to make sure that the dig moves. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, so I don't have to try and do it when it's on the car. You're just taking off a hair, and that's probably only if you tightened it down the way I did. So you see how there's like about a millimeter and a half of space and some thread showing? That's about where you want it. If you tighten it any more than that, so there we go. Now it moves back and forth. Good. So now we need to do our little servo mounts here. And let's make sure that we're orienting these correctly. So, yeah, should be like this. And we need these little M2s. You know what? I want to see if I got some washers that I can put on that. I think I've got some M2 washers. I just don't want to have this head pull through the servo at some point, or start working its way in there as this moves back and forth. See, this is where getting one of these big boxes of metric hardware, it only costs about $10 or $15, but you end up with this huge assortment of hardware that you can use. And here are some nice little M2 washers. So I'm just gonna make a nip in the bag. And get a couple of those out. And it's like if I needed to go to the store to get those, oh my God, what a pain. And I'd pay like $2 for a half dozen washers. You know, mean, it's a bit of an investment to buy a couple boxes of these types of hardware, because I got the button heads. I've also got a box of this type, and it's just coming invaluable. There's been so many occasions where I've wanted a piece of hardware, dropped something, lost something, wanted to modify something, and having that hardware ready access has been a godsend. So you see, that's going to make a huge difference right there. That little bit of extra width. This screw head is never going to work, you know, pull into the plastic and loosen the servo over time. So we have, there's two different ones. There's this one, and there's this one. And this one with the hole here and the pin goes on this side of the servo, like this. And it's kind of hard to orient these because they don't fit flush against the side of the servo or anything. So I'm not gonna overdo tightening them. I'm just gonna kind of get them there in place. And when I put this in the car, and these mounts actually get screwed down, excuse me. Again, just touching down, snug but not tight. Okay, there we go. And I would say we are guaranteed to need this piece here, this extension. Depending on how things are set up, might even need a longer one, which I have some if I need it. Now, here's an important part. We have a certain amount of space that this shaft needs to be distance from the transmission for it to be in four-wheel drive, and another measurement for dig. And that's going to be done programmatically in the radio, and I'm going to demonstrate how to do that, at least with my radio. Your radio may be different, and the controls may be different, but they're going to have the same functions, or at least they should if you've got a decent radio. And you have to have a 3-channel radio to use this. So that third channel that controls this servo, you're going to have to adjust programmatically. So the third channel is usually a switch. It's an on or off, an up or down, a left or a right, basically. And in this case, it's going to have an endpoint that puts us into four-wheel drive, and an endpoint in the other direction that puts us into dig. And you don't want to have it go beyond those positions, or it's going to be straining against the mechanism and try to tear itself off, or, you know, push this thing further than it should. Now, the dig can't be pushed further than it needs to be. It's that fork is going to be pushing the dig locker to one side or to the other. You do not want that fork pressing. I mean, I did put grease in there to make sure that that fork moves smoothly, but if you've got that fork pressing hard against the dig, holding it in place, you want it to have a little bit of a variance there. You don't want it to be loose so that it comes uncoupled, but at the same time, you don't want it to be holding hard against the dig locker. Otherwise, that fork mechanism is going to wear against the against the dig. So, you know, and likewise in this position, the same thing. So that's something we're going to have to tune for. So remember that that page is something you're going to need to come back to. So now it's time to attach the transmission to the bottom of the chassis, or the skid plate. In this case, we don't really have a chassis. As long as I'm got this handy, I'm going to go ahead and set up that that last pinion gear, the 11, and then I'm going to set those parts aside for later. Okay, this I'm unlikely to use because I'm always going to use the dig with this. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 countersunk screws are all the same size, and then these 2 button heads are going to be used to mount the servo. So let's start with the transmission. That is pretty obvious how this goes. Can only go one way. It seems that they've improved on the transmission mounting. As I recall, on the original SCX-10, the bolts that hold the transmission to the skid plate were maybe 8 millimeters, and they didn't stay, you know, long in a. They didn't stay tight very long because they would wear out the soft plastic if you had to take it apart more than once, and the transmission would be hard to keep tight. There's a lot of aftermarket parts available. One of the things I've seen is a skid plate for the skid plate, like an aluminum plate, and you know, it may look kind of cool, but all that's really doing is lowering the center of your car. You're taking away from your ground clearance, and plastic is going to slide at least as easily as aluminum, so I wouldn't recommend that personally. I think one of these goes like this. And just like the transmission, they've given us some seriously long screws to hold these servo mounts. You're never going to have to worry about those coming loose on you. In fact, it's real work driving them all the way in. They're so deep into the plastic. But Again, that's just nice because it's solid. And that's what you want for a vehicle like this, for things to be solid. Okay, there we go. Our transmission assembly with motor and skid plate. This is the heart of the vehicle. It's a thing of beauty. So now we got to put together axles. Bag F. And we are running short on bags. We will be done soon. A lot of metal pieces there, which is good. These axles are a combination of steel and plastic. So I'm going to kind of lay out some stuff here. Let's see. Ball socket. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4, 3, 2s, and 1s. So we need a 2 and a 1 at either end. So let me just get this laid out like this. We're going to need a... Okay, the ones are going to go at the other side. So a 2 and a 2. Three, let's say, is, I guess, the front or the rear. We'll find out. I think it's probably the front, usually is shorter. 4. And we have a 1 and a 1. So we're going to need a pin at each end. We're going to need a barrel at each end. That's all. Wait a second. Countersunk screws. We need 2 of those. 1 at each end. Okay. So now we can start putting these together. Let's start with these pieces. I'm going to slide one in here. I'm going to take this screw, slide it up inside there. You know what? That's metal on metal. I'm going to put some Loctite on there. And they do say Loctite, so I should have done that. Easy way to do that. Well, I'll just go ahead and do it from below. That's fine. I was going to say I could put the Loctite in the hole up here, but then I might put in too much and not be able to get it back up apart again at some point. Okay. just finding out where the hole is on the barrel now. Okay, so you get the hole pointing perpendicular like that. Now I'm going to put a little bit of grease in the cup here. And then we can line this hole up with the hole in the barrel. And slide the pin through. So then we have this. Now that pin doesn't have any specific anchor. The plastic cap anchors it, prevents it from getting away. So line up the cap with this hole here and the hole in the cap. And as you can see, that covers that pin. And as you can see, there's a large hole and a small hole. This pin drops in. And I'm just going to start these out. We're going to have to pull them in a minute or so when we put them onto the axles. But I just don't want the caps coming off. And then the pins can drop out. Now, properly lubricating these pieces is essential. They are spinning and rocking back and forth. It's basically like a U-joint, and you want them to be totally coated with lubricant. If you line everything up, it slides together easy. They look like they're hard to build, but they're really not. Okay, now that we're starting to get these together, I'm going to start attaching them to the transmission, or at least the ends that are relevant to that. So, our rear is the 1-3-2, 3 is the shorter, or whatever direction this is. So, we're going to have that, and the 2 is the long one. And then that's going to attach to one of the pumpkins. So I can pull this pin here. It's like a grub screw and a pin combined. Okay, so we want to slide this in over this axle, and we're going to drop that pin, the threaded pin, right in there and tighten it down. Okay, so these two go to there. So let's get this one together. So that's the piece that's going to go on the pumpkin. This is our number 2 piece. That's going to attach to the transmission on the other side. You know, even though the plastic will probably act more or less like Loctite, they do recommend Loctite for these pins. I'm going to go ahead and put some on. Can't hurt. And this is a lot of motion on these items, so I'm going to pull that one out again in a second and Loctite that one too. Make sure that goes all the way through. Okay. So we'll worry about these 2 pieces in a little bit. So now we have some super long grub screws. Okay, so this is the front. You can see that there's the clutch, slipper clutch nut facing that way, the motor facing towards the rear. This is the front axle with the servo. So we're going to start by so we have these 2 long grub screws. We need one for each. There's these 2 slotted holes here. You can see there's no exits here. Okay, these 2 arms are going to be connected together by this. The grub screw is going to screw down in here like that. And that is, there we go. Since you can't see what you're doing because it's embedded in plastic, I'm sure there's an obvious bottoming point. Yep. Okay. So before we connect these, we need to get our axle in place. And this plastic is self-lubricating, so we don't need to grease up these the axles themselves. Okay, so we need a pair of 14s, and let's see which hole. They recommend the bottom hole out of the 3. I wonder why we have 3 holes. guess we'll figure that out later. Maybe an adjustment or something we can tinker with. Okay, and the fourth control arm. Okay, so there is our front suspension movement. Okay. And now we do the rear. Same scenario. Okay. Okay, just like the front ones, these are going to go to the bottom hole. So here we go. Shocks, shocks. We're in business.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.